Orphaned, dirty and alone, she walked among hurried faces pretending not to see her, until she witnessed a man falling onto the tracks and without hesitation ran against time. She saved his life and vanished, not knowing he was one of the richest men in the country. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The dark clouds hung heavily over Manhattan's skyline, promising rain that never seemed to come. Instead, they trapped the August heat against the concrete, creating a stifling atmosphere that made everyone move a little faster toward air-conditioned sanctuaries. Everyone except Lily Parker. The 7-year-old girl had no sanctuary to rush to. Her small feet, bare and calloused, navigated the hot sidewalks of New York City with practiced precision. Her blonde hair, once bright like summer wheat, now hung in dirty tangles around her thin face. The faded purple t-shirt she wore had belonged to another child at the shelter before it closed down 3 months ago. Since then, Lily had been surviving on her own, invisible to the thousands of busy New Yorkers who passed her daily. She moved like a shadow through Grand Central Terminal, occasionally stopping to check trash cans for half-eaten sandwiches or abandoned bottles with a few sips of water left. The terminal was good for this. Tourists often left in a hurry, discarding perfectly good food. It was also a place where she could blend in despite her appearance. In a city of 8 million stories, hers was just another tragic footnote most people chose not to read. 2 years ago, Lily had a home, a small apartment in Queens, where her mother would braid her hair before school and tell her stories about princesses who saved themselves. But after the fire took everything, her mother, their home, all sense of safety, Lily became part of a system too overwhelmed to truly see her. After bouncing between foster homes and eventually slipping through the cracks, she learned to rely only on herself. That same afternoon, on the other side of the city, Richard Harrington stared blankly at the Manhattan skyline from his penthouse office on the 57th floor. At 42, he was one of the most powerful tech investors in the country. His company, Harrington Innovations, had transformed how America interacted with technology. His face had graced the cover of Fortune, Forbes, and Time. His net worth had more zeros than most people could comprehend. And yet, as he loosened his Italian silk tie, Richard felt nothing but emptiness. "Mr. Harrington, the board is waiting in the conference room." His assistant, Melissa, stood at the door, her face carefully neutral despite the tension that had been building all week. "Tell them I'll be there in 5, he replied, not turning from the window. When the door closed, Richard sighed deeply. The company he had built from nothing was being torn apart from within. His closest business partners, people he had trusted for over a decade, had been systematically undermining him, diverting funds, and preparing for a hostile takeover. The evidence had come to light just days after finding his wife of 8 years in their Hamptons house with his supposed friend. Everything he had built, both professionally and personally, was crumbling. Richard picked up his phone and scrolled to his lawyer's number, then hesitated. What was the point? He felt hollow, used up. Maybe it was time to let go. Maybe tonight he would just... His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Melissa clearing her throat. "They're getting impatient." "Sir," Richard nodded, composed himself, and followed her to face the sharks who were once his friends. The board meeting was brutal. 4 hours of accusations, denials, and thinly veiled threats wrapped in corporate legalese. When it finally ended, Richard felt like he'd been through a physical beating. He dismissed his driver and decided to take the subway home, something he hadn't done in years. He needed to be surrounded by normal people going about their lives, people who weren't plotting to destroy each other for a few $1 million more. At Grand Central, the evening rush was in full swing. Business people, tourists, and locals all pushed past each other in the choreographed chaos that was distinctly New York. Richard moved through the crowd mechanically, his mind elsewhere, his expensive suit and watch making him stand out despite his slumped shoulders. Lily spotted him immediately. People with money had a certain look, a confidence in their stride, quality clothes that fit perfectly, and most importantly, they rarely looked down. This man was different, though. He wore wealth, but his eyes were downcast, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked like how she felt most days. She followed him at a distance, not with any particular plan in mind. Sometimes wealthy people in distress gave more generously to homeless children. Guilt was a powerful motivator. Other times they were the cruelest, as if their own pain justified inflicting more on others. Lily had learned to read people well enough to know which was which. Richard made his way to the platform, barely aware of his surroundings. His mind kept returning to the moment in his office, when giving up had seemed so tempting. He stood near the edge of the platform, the rumble of an approaching train vibrating beneath his feet. That's when the dizzy spell hit him. The lack of food, the stress, the emotional exhaustion, it all culminated in a sudden vertigo that made the world spin violently. Richard swayed, tried to step back, but his foot found only air as he toppled forward. The crowd gasped collectively. Some screamed. Many pulled out their phones to record what was about to happen. The train's horn blared urgently. No one moved to help, no one except Lily. Without thinking, the small girl darted through the forest of adult legs, ducked under the safety barrier, and launched herself toward the fallen man. Her size, usually a disadvantage, allowed her to move where adults couldn't. She reached Richard just as the train rounded the final bend, its headlights illuminating their figures in stark relief. "Mister, wake up!" she screamed, tugging at his suit jacket with all her strength. Richard was semi-conscious, trying to understand what was happening. The girl's voice seemed to come from far away. With a determination born from years of survival, Lily grabbed his collar with both hands and pulled with every ounce of her meager weight. They rolled together away from the tracks, as the train thundered past with inches to spare, its metal body creating a wall of wind that nearly sucked them back in. The screech of brakes filled the station as the train operator, having seen the commotion, brought the massive machine to an emergency stop. Richard coughed, dust filling his lungs, and opened his eyes to see a dirty, thin face hovering above his own. For a moment he thought he was hallucinating. "You okay, mister?" the girl asked, her voice oddly calm given what had just happened. Before Richard could respond, the platform erupted into action. Transit police rushed forward. Medics appeared from somewhere. The crowd, momentarily unified by the shared experience of almost witnessing tragedy, began to applaud. In the confusion, Lily did what she always did. She disappeared. Claire's hands reached to help Richard to his feet. She slipped away, vanishing into the crowd like morning mist. By the time Richard was coherent enough to ask about her, the girl was long gone, back to her invisible existence in the shadows of America's wealthiest city. "Sir, you need to be checked out at a hospital," a paramedic insisted, taking Richard's blood pressure. "The girl," Richard mumbled, still dazed. "There was a little girl." "Yes, sir. Several witnesses saw her. Quite brave. But she ran off before anyone could talk to her." Richard tried to stand, wobbling slightly. "We need to find her. She saved my life." The paramedic exchanged glances with a police officer. They'd seen this before. Wealthy person has a near-death experience, becomes temporarily obsessed with their rescuer, then moves on once the adrenaline wears off. "Sir, right now we need to make sure you're okay. You took a hard fall." But Richard wasn't listening. For the first time in months, the fog of depression had lifted, replaced by a single clear thought. He needed to find that girl. She had appeared from nowhere at his lowest moment and pulled him back from the edge, literally and figuratively. In her small, determined face, he had seen something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. As the paramedics guided him to an ambulance, Richard pulled out his phone and made a call. "Melissa, I need you to contact our security team. There's someone I need to find." Chapter 2. The Search. The next morning, Richard sat in his penthouse surrounded by a team of professionals. Despite their insistence, he had refused hospitalization. Now his living room had been transformed into a command center of sorts. His head of security, former FBI agent Marcus Williams, was coordinating with a private investigator, 2 data analysts, and a child welfare specialist. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said, his deep voice filling the room. "You want us to find a homeless child in New York City based on a brief encounter during which you were barely conscious?" Richard adjusted the ice pack on his bruised shoulder. "That's exactly what I'm asking." "She's about 7 years old. Blonde hair, very thin, wearing a purple shirt and no shoes." The child welfare specialist, Dr. Eleanor Ross, shook her head sympathetically. "Mr. Harrington, Do you know how many homeless children match that description in this city? This one is different, Richard insisted. She saved my life. Marcus and Eleanor exchanged glances. They had both worked for Richard long enough to know he wasn't normally prone to sentimentality or impulsive crusades. All right, Marcus finally conceded. We'll start with the CCTV footage from Grand Central. We should be able to get a clear image of her face at least. Then we'll coordinate with shelters, soup kitchens, and community centers around the area. Check with Child Protective Services too, Eleanor added. A child that young living completely alone would be unusual, even in New York. She might be in the system somewhere. Richard nodded, but he wasn't convinced. Something about the girl's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a child who trusted the system. They were the eyes of someone who had learned to navigate the world alone. Do whatever it takes, he said, standing up. I need to find her. Marcus stayed behind after the others filed out. Rich, he said, dropping the professional tone they maintained in front of others, what's really going on here? Is this about what happened with Jessica and the company? Richard looked at his oldest friend, the one person from his inner circle who hadn't betrayed him. Maybe, he admitted. So maybe when you're a second away from being hit by a train, and a child who has nothing risks everything to save you. It changes your perspective. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, we'll find her. Across town, Lily was huddled in her current sleeping spot, a forgotten maintenance alcove in Bryant Park. The previous night's events had left her shaken, though she would never admit it. She'd acted on instinct when she saw the man fall. It wasn't the first time she'd helped someone, but it was certainly the closest she'd come to getting hurt herself. Her stomach growled painfully. In the chaos, she'd missed her chance to get dinner from the trash cans at Grand Central. Now she would have to wait until the breakfast rush at a nearby cafe, where a kind barista sometimes left bags of day-old pastries by the back door. Lily pulled her knees to her chest and closed her eyes, trying to ignore the hunger. She thought about the man she'd saved. He'd looked important. His suit was nicer than the ones she usually saw, and even half-conscious, there had been something different about him. For a brief moment, as she'd pulled him from the tracks, their eyes had met and she'd felt recognized, truly seen, for the first time in years. She shook the thought away. People like that didn't remember people like her. That's how the world worked. The next few days passed in a blur of activity for Richard. The board was still pushing for his removal. His soon-to-be ex-wife's lawyers were demanding an exorbitant settlement, and his search for the girl seemed to be hitting dead end after dead end. We've got something, Marcus announced on the fourth day, striding into Richard's office with a tablet. Facial recognition got a match from the Grand Central footage. Richard took the tablet eagerly. On the screen was an enhanced image of Lily's face from the security camera, alongside a school photo of a younger, cleaner, smiling version of the same girl. Her name is Lily Parker, age 7. Mother was Andrea Parker, father unknown, at least officially. Marcus swiped to show more information. Mother died in an apartment fire in Queens 2 years ago. Lily went into foster care but was reported missing from her third placement about 4 months ago. The system basically lost track of her. Richard stared at the before and after images. The contrast was heartbreaking. In the school photo, Lily's eyes sparkled with childish confidence. In the security footage, those same eyes held a wariness that no child should know. Where is she now? Richard asked. That's the problem. We've been checking all the usual spots where homeless children congregate. Shelters, food distribution points, parks. Nothing so far. Richard stood up abruptly. I want to go with you tomorrow. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Rich, this isn't exactly your terrain. These areas can be... I don't care, Richard interrupted. I'll wear something casual. No one will know who I am. The next morning, Richard dressed in jeans and a plain button-down shirt, probably the most ordinary clothes he owned. He met Marcus at a coffee shop near Bryant Park, where they were starting their search. The cafe owner here has reported seeing a small blonde girl digging through their trash several times, Marcus explained. They've started leaving food out for her, but she's skittish. Only comes when no one's watching. They spent hours waiting and walking around the area. Richard was shocked by how many homeless people he saw. Not because he didn't know homelessness existed, but because he realized he'd trained himself not to see it. How many times had he walked these same streets, eyes straight ahead, mind on business, completely oblivious to the suffering around him. As dusk approached, Marcus suggested they call it a day. "We can try again tomorrow," he said. "Different location." Richard nodded reluctantly. They were walking back toward Fifth Avenue when he spotted a flash of purple in an alley between two buildings. Without thinking, he changed direction. "Rich!" "Wait," Marcus called, but Richard was already halfway down the alley. There, crouched behind a dumpster, was Lily. She was trying to open a discarded fast food bag, her small fingers working desperately at the knotted plastic. When she heard footsteps, she looked up, her body instantly tensing to run. Richard froze, afraid of scaring her off. "Lily," he said softly. Her eyes widened with recognition and fear. She dropped the bag and backed away. "It's okay," Richard said, kneeling down to appear less threatening. "Do you remember me? From the train station?" Lily nodded cautiously, her eyes darting between Richard and the alley entrance, calculating her escape route. "I've been looking for you," Richard continued. "I wanted to thank you. You saved my life." "You don't have to thank me," Lily replied, her voice small but steady. "Anyone would have done it." Richard shook his head. "No, they wouldn't. Everyone else just watched. You were the only one brave enough to help." Marcus appeared at the alley entrance but stayed back, understanding the delicacy of the situation. "Are you hungry?" Richard asked. Lily's eyes narrowed suspiciously. She'd learned that adults who offered food often wanted something in return, information, labor, or worse. "What do you want?" she asked bluntly. The question hit Richard like a physical blow. What kind of world was it, where a child assumed kindness came with strings attached? "Nothing," he said truthfully. "I just want to buy you dinner. To say thank you." Lily considered this, her survival instincts warring with her hunger. Finally, hunger won. "I like hamburgers," she said cautiously. Richard smiled. "Hamburgers it is." They went to a small diner a few blocks away. Richard had to resist the urge to take her to the most expensive restaurant in the city. That would only scare her off. Instead, he let her choose the place, a greasy spoon where no one looked twice at a dirty child. Lily ordered a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. Richard watched in pained amazement as she devoured the food with the focused intensity of someone who didn't know when her next meal would come. "Slow down," he said gently. "You'll get a stomachache, and you can order more if you're still hungry." Lily paused mid-bite, surprised. "Really? Really?" As she ate, Richard tried to engage her in conversation, careful to avoid anything that might seem threatening. "Do you stay around here usually?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "Sometimes. I move around." "Where do you sleep?" Another shrug. "Different places. There's a good spot in Bryant Park, and sometimes the church on 44th leaves their back door unlocked." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. This child had been navigating homelessness in one of the world's most dangerous cities alone. "Lily," he said carefully, "would you like to sleep somewhere safe tonight?" "Just for tonight," he added quickly, seeing her expression change. "No strings attached. You can leave any time you want." "Where?" she asked, suspicion returning to her voice. "I have a friend who runs a shelter for kids," Marcus interjected, joining the conversation for the first time. "It's clean, safe, and they don't ask too many questions." Lily considered this as she finished her milkshake. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Just for tonight," she agreed. "And I can leave whenever I want?" "Absolutely," Richard promised. As they left the diner, Richard felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. He'd found her, step one accomplished. But as he watched her small form walking ahead of him, those thin shoulders carrying burdens no child should bear, he knew finding her was just the beginning. The real challenge would be earning her trust. And deep down, though he couldn't quite articulate it yet, Richard knew this chance encounter was changing something fundamental within him. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about his failing company or his broken marriage. He was thinking about someone else entirely. Someone who, against all odds, had given him a second chance at life. Chapter 3. Broken Trust. The children's shelter was clean but sparse, located in a converted brownstone in Hell's Kitchen. As Marcus led them through the front door, Lily's grip on her plastic bag of leftover fries tightened. Her eyes darted around, assessing exits, threats, and potential allies, habits formed from hard experience. A middle-aged woman with grey-streaked hair approached them with a warm smile. "Marcus, good to see you," she said before turning her attention to Lily. "And who do we have here?" "This is Lily," Marcus replied. "She needs a place for tonight." The woman, who introduced herself as Sharon, crouched down to Lily's level. "Well, Lily, we're happy to have you. Would you like to see where you'll be sleeping?" Lily glanced up at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. She followed Sharon up a narrow staircase, leaving Richard and Marcus in the lobby. "She'll be safe here," Marcus assured him. "Sharon runs a tight ship. No one gets in or out without her knowing." Richard nodded distractedly, his eyes still on the staircase where Lily had disappeared. "What happens tomorrow?" Marcus sighed. "Legally, we should contact Child Protective Services. She's a minor reported missing from foster care." "And then what?" Richard pressed. "They put her back in the system that failed her. The one she ran away from?" "Rich," Marcus said carefully, "I know you feel responsible for her, but there are protocols for situations like this." Richard's jaw tightened. Those protocols left a 7-year-old living on the streets. Before Marcus could respond, Sharon returned. "She's settling in," she informed them. "I've given her clean clothes and shown her the bathroom. Poor thing looks like she hasn't had a proper wash in weeks." "Can I see her?" Richard asked. Sharon hesitated. "She's about to shower. Maybe tomorrow morning? Visiting hours start at 9. Richard wanted to argue but knew it wouldn't help. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and handed Sharon several $100 bills. "For her care," he said, "and for any other kids who need extra help." Sharon accepted the money with a grateful nod. "She'll be here in the morning, Mr. Harrington, I promise." But when Richard returned at 8:30 the next morning, bringing a bag of new clothes, books, and a stuffed bear, Sharon met him with a distressed expression. "She's gone," she said. "I checked on her at 6 a.m., and she was sleeping soundly. By 7, when we do wake-up calls, her bed was empty. The window in the bathroom was open." Richard felt his heart sink. "Did she take anything?" "Just the clean clothes we gave her and some food from the kitchen," Sharon replied. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrington. This happens sometimes with street kids. They get spooked." Richard pulled out his phone to call Marcus, then stopped. What was he doing? Treating a child like some corporate asset, to be tracked down and acquired. Maybe Lily had left because she sensed exactly that she was becoming a project for him, a way to assuage his guilt or fill the emptiness in his life. "Mr. Harrington," Sharon's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Would you like me to call the police?" "No," he said after a moment, "no police. But if she comes back, please call this number." He handed her his card with his personal cell written on the back. Day or night? Richard spent the next week in a strange limbo. During the day, he fought the corporate battle at Harrington Innovations, fending off the hostile takeover attempt with a renewed vigor that surprised his opponents. At night, he found himself walking the streets around Bryant Park and Grand Central, hoping for a glimpse of purple clothing or tangled blonde hair. His lawyer, Catherine Miller, couldn't understand the change in him. "A week ago you were ready to let them take the company," she remarked after a particularly brutal negotiation session. "Now you're fighting like a cornered lion." "What changed?" Richard considered the question. "I guess I remembered what it feels like to have something worth fighting for." Catherine raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Meanwhile, Lily had returned to her life on the streets, though not without changes. The clean clothes from the shelter, jeans, a green t-shirt, and actual shoes, made her less conspicuous. She'd also taken a small backpack containing toiletries, allowing her to maintain some level of cleanliness by using public bathrooms. But more significantly, her encounter with Richard had awakened something she'd worked hard to suppress: hope. And hope, for a child who had learned to survive by expecting nothing, was dangerous territory. She found herself returning to places where she might run into him again. The diner where they'd eaten hamburgers, the alley where he'd found her, even the periphery of Bryant Park, though she was careful to establish a new sleeping location, one that couldn't be easily tracked. On the 10th day after her disappearance from the shelter, Lily was sitting on a bench in Madison Square Park, watching pigeons fight over discarded pretzel bits, when a familiar face caught her eye. Not Richard, but the other man, Marcus. He was walking purposefully through the park, scanning faces. Looking for her, Lily's first instinct was to run, but curiosity kept her seated. She pulled her hood up and watched as Marcus approached a hot dog vendor, showed him something on his phone, a picture of her. and then continued his search. Lily waited until he was on the other side of the park before slipping away. Her mind raced. If they were still looking for her, maybe Richard had meant what he said about just wanting to help. Or maybe they were going to force her back into foster care. She couldn't risk it. For 3 more days, Lily played a cat-and-mouse game with Marcus, observing him from a distance as he systematically searched areas where homeless children congregated. She had to admit he was thorough, but she was better at hiding than he was at seeking. On the 4th day, however, her luck ran out. Not with Marcus, but with 2 police officers who spotted her sleeping on a bench in the early morning hours. One of them recognized her from the missing children bulletins. "Hey, sweetheart," the female officer said gently, shaking Lily awake. "Are you Lily Parker?" Lily's eyes flew open, and she immediately tried to bolt, but the officer caught her arm. "It's okay, we're not going to hurt you. We just want to help." "I don't need help," Lily insisted, struggling against the grip. "You've been reported missing." "Lily, we need to take you back to your social worker." The word sent a chill through Lily's body. Back to the system, back to foster homes where children were seen as paychecks, back to being invisible in a different way. "No." To her, she screamed, fighting harder. "You can't make me go back." Her resistance attracted attention from morning commuters. Some stopped to watch, others hurried past, uncomfortable with the scene. "Lily, please calm down," the officer tried again. "We're required by law. Let her go." The authoritative voice cut through the commotion. Richard stood there, in a suit that probably cost more than the officer's monthly salary, his expression a mix of concern and determination. The officers exchanged glances. "Sir, this is police business," the male officer said. "Please step back." Richard didn't move. "My name is Richard Harrington. This child saved my life 2 weeks ago at Grand Central Terminal. I've been looking for her." "Mr. Harrington," the female officer said, recognition dawning on her face. "I read about the incident, but still she's in the system." "We have protocols." "I understand," Richard interrupted, "and I respect your job. But before you take her anywhere, would you allow me to make a call to someone who might have a better solution?" The officers hesitated, then nodded. Richard stepped aside and made a quick call to Eleanor Ross, the child welfare specialist on his payroll. After a brief, intense conversation, he returned to the group. "Dr. Eleanor Ross from the Children's Rights Foundation will be here in 10 minutes, he told the officers. "She has connections with the state's child welfare department and can help navigate this situation in Lily's best interest." The mention of the prestigious foundation seemed to reassure the officers. They agreed to wait, though they maintained a hold on Lily, who had stopped struggling but was watching the proceedings with wary eyes. Richard knelt down to her level. "Lily, do you remember me?" She nodded, her expression guarded. "I'm not going to let them send you back to a place you don't want to be," he promised quietly. "But running and hiding isn't the answer either. Will you trust me, just for a little while?" Lily stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. She'd gotten good at reading adults, knowing when they were lying, when they saw her as a burden, when they were just going through the motions of caring. Richard's eyes held none of that. They were clear, direct, and something else. Vulnerable, maybe. Like he needed her to say yes as much as she needed someone to help her. "Okay," she whispered finally. "But if you lie to me, I'll run away again. And next time you won't find me." Richard nodded solemnly. "That's fair." When Eleanor arrived, she took charge with the confidence of someone used to navigating bureaucratic systems. After showing credentials that made even the officers look impressed, she had a private conversation with them, then approached Richard and Lily. "I've convinced them to let me take temporary custody of Lily while we sort things out," she explained. "It's not a permanent solution, but it buys us time." "Thank you, Eleanor," Richard said, relief evident in his voice. Eleanor crouched down to Lily's level. "Lily, I know you don't know me, but my job is to help kids like you. Right now that means finding you a safe place to stay that isn't the streets and isn't back in the foster home you ran from. Would that be okay?" Lily looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Eleanor. "Where would I go?" Eleanor glanced up at Richard, who stepped forward. "I have a place where you could stay," he said carefully. "It's big, probably too big, with plenty of room. You'd have your own bedroom, bathroom, food whenever you want it, and no one would make you do anything you don't want to do." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Your house?" Richard nodded. Just until we figure out something permanent. And Eleanor will check on you regularly to make sure everything's okay." "Why?" Lily asked, the question that had been burning in her mind for days. "Why are you doing all this?" Richard considered his answer carefully. He could tell her about the emptiness in his life, about how saving him had given him purpose again, about how her courage had reminded him of what really mattered. But those were adult problems, adult emotions, too much to put on a child's shoulders. "Because," he said simply, "everyone deserves a chance. You gave me one when you pulled me off those tracks. I'd like to return the favor." Lily thought about this for a long moment. Then, with the directness only a child could manage, she said, "Can I have pancakes for breakfast? At the shelter they said they only make them on Sundays." Richard laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even him. "Lily, you can have pancakes for breakfast, lunch and dinner if you want." And just like that, the deal was struck. As Eleanor handled the paperwork with the officers, Richard tentatively offered his hand to Lily. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. Her small fingers wrapped around three of his, a tenuous connection between two broken people who had somehow found each other in a city of millions. Neither knew what came next. Neither was ready to fully trust. But in that moment, they were both willing to try, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. Chapter 4. New Beginnings. Richard's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek high-rise in Tribeca, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. As the private elevator doors opened directly into the foyer, Lily froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You live here?" she whispered, clutching her small backpack to her chest. "All by yourself?" Richard nodded, suddenly seeing his home through her eyes. The sprawling, open-concept living area, the minimalist furniture that cost more than some people's annual salary, the sterile perfection that had never felt like a home. "It's too big for one person," he admitted. "Always has been." Eleanor, who had accompanied them, placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Let's get you settled, shall we? I'll need to document your living conditions for the temporary placement paperwork." Richard led them through the penthouse, showing Lily the kitchen, where she lingered, opening the fully stocked refrigerator with wonder, the media room, which she approached cautiously, as if the massive television might bite, and finally, the guest bedroom that would be hers. "This can be your room," he said, opening the door to a spacious bedroom with its own bathroom. "We can change anything you don't like." Lily stepped inside, her small feet silent on the plush carpet. The room was tastefully decorated in blues and whites, with a queen-sized bed that looked large enough to swallow her whole. She approached it tentatively, pressing her hand against the mattress as if testing it for traps. "It's soft," she said, surprised. "Too soft?" Richard asked. Lily shook her head. "I don't know. I haven't slept in a real bed for a long time." The simple statement hit Richard like a physical blow. Eleanor caught his eye, her expression professional but her eyes conveying a clear message. "This won't be easy for either of you." After Eleanor had taken photographs and notes of the living arrangements, she sat with Richard in the kitchen while Lily explored her new bathroom, marveling at the huge bathtub and the array of toiletries. "Mr. Harrington," Eleanor began, keeping her voice low, "I want to be clear about something. This arrangement is highly unusual. The only reason it's happening at all is because of your influence and resources." "I understand," Richard replied. "And I appreciate your help." Eleanor leaned forward. "What you need to understand is that Lily has experienced significant trauma. The loss of her mother, the instability of foster care, months of homelessness. These experiences shape a child's development, their ability to trust, their sense of security." Richard nodded. "I know it won't be simple. I'm prepared for that." "Are you?" Eleanor challenged gently. "This isn't a business problem you can solve by throwing money at it. Lily needs stability, consistency, patience. She'll test boundaries. She might reject comfort because it feels unfamiliar. She might hoard food because she's used to scarcity." She paused. "And she might run again if she feels threatened or overwhelmed." "What can I do?" Richard asked, his usual confidence wavering. "Be honest with her always. Children like Lily have radar for insincerity. Create routines she can count on. And most importantly, understand that trust takes time." Eleanor handed him a card. "This is Dr. Sophia Chen, a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. Lily should see her twice a week at minimum." After Eleanor left, promising to return in 3 days, Richard found himself alone with Lily for the first time. She had emerged from the bathroom with clean hands and face, her hair somewhat tamed though still tangled. "Are you hungry?" he asked, realizing he had no idea what time she usually ate or what food she liked beyond hamburgers and pancakes. Lily nodded, looking around the kitchen uncertainly. "What am I allowed to have?" "Anything you want," Richard said, opening the refrigerator. "We can order in, or I can try to cook something, though I should warn you I'm not very good at it." Lily considered this. "Can we have spaghetti? My mom used to make it." Richard felt a tightness in his chest at the mention of her mother. It was the first personal detail Lily had volunteered. "Spaghetti sounds perfect. Want to help me?" Together, they assembled a simple meal. Spaghetti with jarred marinara sauce and pre-grated Parmesan cheese. Richard's kitchen, despite its professional-grade appliances, showed all the signs of someone who rarely cooked: pristine cookware, empty spice racks, and drawers of untouched utensils. As they ate at the massive dining table, Richard tried to establish some ground rules. "Lily, I want you to feel safe and comfortable here. This is your home for now, okay?" She nodded cautiously, twirling spaghetti around her fork with focused precision. "There are a few rules we need to agree on," he continued. "First, if you need anything at all, you tell me. Food, clothes, help with something, or if you're feeling scared or sad." Lily didn't respond, but he could tell she was listening. "Second, you don't leave the apartment without me. It's not because I don't trust you," he added quickly, seeing her expression darken. "It's because it's not safe. This building has security, but out there—" He gestured toward the windows. "I lived out there for months," Lily pointed out. "I was okay." Richard chose his next words carefully. "You survived out there, Lily, and that shows how brave and strong you are. But no child should have to be that brave or that strong." She seemed to consider this, then nodded slightly. "What's the third rule?" "The third rule is that there are no other rules except the ones we agree on together." Lily looked up, surprised. "Really? Really? This is new for both of us. We'll figure it out as we go." After dinner, Richard showed Lily how to use the television in her room, helped her find pajamas among the clothes Eleanor had brought, and awkwardly wished her good night. He left her door cracked open at her request and retreated to his home office, emotionally exhausted but oddly energized. Around midnight, he heard a small sound. Following it, he found Lily in the kitchen, standing on a chair, reaching into a high cabinet. "Lily?" he called softly. She startled, nearly falling from the chair. In her hand was a package of cookies she'd discovered during their dinner preparation. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, eyes wide with fear. "I was hungry and I didn't want to wake you up and—" "It's okay," Richard interrupted, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "You don't need to apologize for being hungry. You can eat whenever you want." Lily clutched the cookies to her chest. "Really? Really?" Richard moved slowly into the kitchen. "But how about we put these in a place you can reach? And maybe we can stock your room with some snacks too, so you don't have to get up in the middle of the night." Lily nodded, relaxing slightly. As Richard moved around the kitchen, placing various snacks in a low drawer he designated as Lily's, he realized Eleanor had been right. Food insecurity was going to be an ongoing issue. "Did you have trouble sleeping?" he asked as Lily sat at the counter, carefully eating a cookie as if it might be taken away at any moment. She shrugged. "The bed is weird, too soft, and it's too quiet." Richard understood. After years on the streets, the safety and comfort of the penthouse must feel alien. "Would it help if there was some background noise? I could leave the TV on low or get you a sound machine." "What's a sound machine?" "It makes noise to help you sleep. Rain sounds or ocean waves." Lily considered this. "Could it make city sounds, like cars and people?" The request surprised him. "I'm sure we can find something like that." As they sat together in the quiet kitchen, Richard on one side of the island and Lily on the other, he was struck by the strangeness of the situation. 2 weeks ago, he had been contemplating giving up on his company, on his future, maybe even on life itself. Now he was responsible for this small wounded person who had somehow saved him in more ways than one. The next morning brought new challenges. Lily woke early, a habit from street life, and Richard found her sitting in the living room, staring out at the city awakening below. She was already dressed in yesterday's clothes, her backpack by her side as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "Ready for those pancakes?" The promise of pancakes coaxed a small smile from her. Richard, despite his limited culinary skills, managed to produce a decent stack of pancakes from a boxed mix. As they ate, he broached the subject of shopping. "I thought we could get you some more clothes today. And anything else you might need for your room." Lily looked down at her plate. "I don't need anything. Everyone needs clothes, Lily, and maybe some books. Do you like to read?" She nodded slightly. "My mom used to read to me. I can read some things myself now." "That's great," Richard said encouragingly. "Maybe we can find some books you'd enjoy." After breakfast, Richard called his assistant to clear his schedule for the day, ignoring her surprised protests. Then he and Lily headed out for what would become a transformative shopping experience for both of them. Richard had planned to take Lily to the high-end children's boutiques he vaguely knew existed in Soho. But as soon as they stepped onto the sidewalk, Lily's body language changed. She pressed closer to his side, her eyes constantly scanning for threats, her hand occasionally brushing against his, as if to reassure herself he was still there. "Too crowded?" he asked, noticing her discomfort. She nodded, looking up at the towering buildings with apprehension. "How about we take a car instead of walking?" he suggested, already pulling out his phone to summon his driver. In the safety of the town car, Lily gradually relaxed, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. Richard redirected the driver to a large department store instead, thinking it might be less overwhelming than navigating multiple boutiques. The store, however, presented its own challenges. The bright lights piped in music, and crowds of shoppers clearly stressed Lily. She flinched at loud noises and kept close to Richard, occasionally clutching the edge of his jacket when someone passed too near. In the children's department, Richard realized another problem. He had no idea what size Lily wore, what styles were appropriate for a 7-year-old, or how much clothing she actually needed. A saleswoman approached, taking in the scene with professional assessment, the obviously wealthy man and the clearly underprivileged child. "Can I help you find something today?" she asked warmly. Richard looked at Lily, who was staring at a display of colorful T-shirts with longing. "We need everything, I think. For my—" He hesitated, unsure how to describe their relationship. "For Lily." The saleswoman, whose name tag read Diane, smiled knowingly. "Starting from scratch, huh? Let's see what we can do." With Diane's help, they assembled a wardrobe for Lily. Jeans, T-shirts, sweaters, pajamas, underwear, socks, and 2 pairs of shoes. Richard insisted on a warm coat as well, thinking ahead to winter. Throughout the process, he deferred to Lily's preferences, noting which colors she gravitated toward, purples and blues, and which styles she rejected, anything with ruffles or glitter. As they moved through the store, adding books, a backpack and toiletries designed for children, Richard noticed something shifting in Lily. Each time he asked for her opinion, or honored her choice, a little more tension left her small frame. By the time they reached the toy department, she was actually leading the way, pointing out items with cautious enthusiasm. "Can I have this?" she asked, holding up a stuffed dog with floppy ears. "Of course," Richard replied, touched by the simple request after he had offered her practically anything in the store. Lily hugged the dog to her chest. "I'll call him Max," she declared, the first truly childlike statement Richard had heard from her. When they finally returned to the penthouse laden with bags, Lily seemed both exhausted and animated. She insisted on arranging her new clothes in the dresser herself, carefully folding each item as if it were made of gold. Richard helped her organize her books on a shelf, noting which titles she placed at eye level, clearly the ones she was most eager to read. As evening approached, they settled into a tentative routine. Richard ordered pizza, remembering how Lily had mentioned it was a special treat her mother had sometimes brought home. They ate in the living room, watching a children's movie Lily selected from the streaming service. The normalcy of it felt foreign to Richard, whose evenings usually involved working late or attending business functions. That night, as he tucked Lily in, an awkward procedure as he had never tucked anyone in before, she surprised him with a question. "How long can I stay here?" Richard sat on the edge of the bed, considering his answer. Eleanor had warned him about making promises he couldn't keep. "I don't know for sure, Lily. But I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you don't have to go back to the places that made you unhappy." She nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. "I like it here," she admitted quietly. "Even if the bed is too soft." Richard smiled. "We'll get you a firmer mattress if you want." "No," she said, snuggling deeper under the covers, her new stuffed dog tucked under her arm. "I think I can get used to it." As Richard turned off the light, leaving only a small nightlight glowing, he heard Lily's voice once more. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the pancakes and Max and everything." Something tightened in Richard's chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. "You're welcome, Lily. Sleep well." Walking back to his room, Richard realized that for the first time in months he felt something like peace. The corporate battles, his failed marriage, the betrayals, they all seemed less important now. In their place was something new, a sense of purpose, of responsibility, of connection to another human being who needed him. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating, and he had no idea if he was up to the challenge. Chapter 5. Growing Pains. 3 weeks into their unusual living arrangement, Richard and Lily had established a fragile routine. Weekday mornings began with breakfast together. Richard had expanded his cooking repertoire to include eggs and toast, though pancakes remained a weekend special. After breakfast, Richard would head to work while Lily attended sessions with Dr. Chen or spent time with Ms. Patterson, the retired teacher Richard had hired as a tutor, to help Lily catch up on the education she'd missed. Evenings were for dinner together, stories, and occasionally a movie. Weekends meant outings to parks, museums, or other child-friendly venues, though Richard was careful to avoid overwhelming Lily with too many people or too much stimulation. Each day brought small victories, moments when Lily's guard would drop, when she would laugh without catching herself, or ask a question without first calculating the risk. But there were setbacks too. Nights when Richard would wake to find Lily sleeping on the floor beside her bed, the plush mattress too unfamiliar to provide comfort. Days when she would retreat into silence, responding to questions with shrugs or single words, and the food hoarding continued. Richard regularly found crackers, fruit, or granola bars tucked into various hiding places around the penthouse. Dr. Chen assured him this was normal. "Trauma responses don't disappear overnight," she explained during one of their weekly check-ins. "Lily is testing her environment, seeing if it's truly safe, if you're truly consistent." On this particular morning, Richard was preparing for an important board meeting. The corporate battle had reached a critical juncture, and today's presentation could determine whether he maintained control of his company. He stood before his closet selecting a tie, when he heard a small voice behind him. "The blue one matches your eyes better." Richard turned to find Lily standing in his doorway, already dressed in jeans and a purple sweater, her hair attempted in a messy, self-made ponytail. He smiled, taking the blue tie she suggested. "You have good taste." Lily entered cautiously, watching as he knotted the tie. "Is today the big meeting?" "The one with the sharks?" Richard had tried to shield Lily from his business troubles, but she was perceptive. She'd overheard phone calls, noticed his late nights reviewing documents, picked up on the tension in his voice when certain names were mentioned. "Yes, it is," he admitted, adjusting his collar. "But don't worry about it. It's just boring grown-up stuff." Lily sat on the edge of his bed, swinging her legs. "Are they still trying to take your company away?" Richard sighed, sitting beside her. "Some of them are, yes. But I'm fighting back." "Because it's yours and they can't just take it," Lily stated with the simple certainty of a child. "Exactly." Richard smiled, touched by her indignation on his behalf. "Now, what would you like for breakfast?" "I have time to make scrambled eggs before Miss Patterson arrives." Lily followed him to the kitchen, climbing onto her usual stool at the counter. "Can I come with you today? To your meeting?" Richard cracked eggs into a bowl. "To the board meeting?" "I don't think that would be very fun for you, Lily. It'll be long and boring, and you'd have to sit very still and quiet." "I can be still and quiet," she insisted. "I used to hide in the library all day, and the librarians never even knew I was there." The casual reminder of her survival strategies sent a pang through Richard's chest. "I know you can, but this isn't the right place." "For a child. Ms. Patterson has a whole day planned for you. Reading, math, and I think even an art project." Lily's face fell slightly, but she nodded. Okay, but will you be home for dinner? You promised we could have spaghetti again. I'll be home, Richard promised, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. Spaghetti night is sacred. After breakfast, Richard said goodbye to Lily and Miss Patterson, feeling the now familiar twist of emotion as Lily gave him a quick, tentative hug. These small gestures of physical affection had begun appearing recently, a brief touch, a lean against his side during movies, and now these lightning-fast hugs that ended almost before they began, as if Lily was afraid of being rejected. The board meeting was every bit as contentious as Richard had anticipated. His former partners, led by James Westfield, had assembled a formidable coalition of investors. The presentation became a battlefield, with thinly veiled accusations and counter-accusations flying across the polished conference table. The truth is, James concluded, his voice smooth with practiced concern, Harrington Innovations has suffered under Richard's distracted leadership these past months. The market doesn't forgive emotional decision-making. Richard maintained his composure, though internally he seethed. What James calls distracted leadership, I call strategic patience. While he's been busy courting short-term investors, I've been securing the Palmer contract, which, as you'll see in the folders before you, represents a 30% increase in our enterprise division's annual revenue. The announcement sent ripples of surprise through the room. Richard hadn't publicized the negotiations, keeping them close to his chest until the contract was signed just 2 days ago. It was a calculated gamble that had paid off perfectly. As the meeting adjourned with a clear victory for Richard's side, James approached him privately. Impressive move with Palmer, he conceded, his smile not reaching his eyes. But this isn't over, Rich. The board may be appeased for now, but they're watching you closely. And I hear you've taken in some street urchin? Really, what are you thinking? Richard stiffened. My personal life is none of your concern, James. Everything about the CEO is the board's concern, James replied. A respectable divorce is one thing. Playing savior to homeless children is another. It raises questions about your judgment, your stability. Stay away from my personal life, James, Richard warned, his voice low, or you'll discover I can be a much more dangerous opponent than you've calculated. The confrontation left Richard unsettled. He hadn't considered how his arrangement with Lily might be weaponized against him in the corporate arena. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, his phone buzzed with a text from Miss Patterson. Please call when you can. Issue with Lily. Nothing dangerous but needs attention. Richard's heart rate accelerated as he called immediately. Miss Patterson answered on the first ring. Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry to bother you during your meeting. What happened? Is Lily okay? She's physically fine, Miss Patterson assured him, but she became very upset during our lesson. She wouldn't tell me why, but she's locked herself in her room and refuses to come out. She's asking for you. Richard checked his watch. He had a meeting with international investors in 30 minutes, one that had been scheduled for weeks and could not be easily rescheduled. I'll be there as soon as I can, he promised, already signaling his driver. When Richard arrived home, he found Miss Patterson waiting anxiously in the living room. She still won't come out, the older woman reported. She was fine all morning, excelling at her reading lesson, actually. Then during math, she just shut down. When I tried to encourage her to continue, she ran to her room. Richard nodded, thanking Miss Patterson and sending her home early. He approached Lily's door and knocked softly. Lily, it's me. Can I come in? Silence. I'm not angry, he continued. I just want to make sure you're okay. After a moment, he heard the lock click. Richard opened the door slowly to find Lily sitting on the floor in the corner of her room, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red from crying. Hey, he said gently, sitting on the floor a few feet away, giving her space. Tough day? Lily shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Ms. Patterson said you were doing great with reading but had some trouble with math. Math can be tricky. I'm not stupid, Lily said suddenly, her voice fierce despite its smallness. I know I'm behind, but I'm not stupid. Of course you're not, Richard agreed, surprised by the outburst. No one thinks that. She does, Lily insisted. I could tell. When I couldn't do the multiplication, she got that look, the same one the teachers used to have before. She trailed off, wiping her eyes angrily. Before what, Lily? Before my mom died, she whispered. When we were living in the shelter, and I kept missing school because Mom was sick. The teachers looked at me like I was hopeless. Richard's chest tightened with anger at the unknown educators who had made a child feel inadequate during the most traumatic time of her life. "Lily, look at me," he said softly. When she raised her eyes, he continued, "You are not hopeless. You are incredibly smart, incredibly brave, and incredibly strong. Math is just a skill, like reading or riding a bike. It takes practice. But what if I can't catch up?" she asked, her voice small. "What if I'm always behind?" The vulnerability in her question revealed the deeper fear, that her worth was tied to her performance, that she had to earn her place in his home through achievement. "Then we'll keep working on it," Richard said simply. "For as long as it takes. And if you're always behind in math, then you'll be behind in math. That's okay. There are plenty of successful people who struggle with multiplication." Lily looked skeptical. "Like who?" Richard thought quickly. "Like me, actually. I was terrible at math as a kid. Still am with mental arithmetic. That's why I have accountants and spreadsheets." "Really?" Lily asked, a hint of hope in her voice. "But you're rich and have a big company. Being successful isn't about being perfect at everything, Lily. It's about working hard at the things that matter to you and finding help for the things you struggle with." Lily considered this, the tension gradually leaving her small body. "I don't want a different tutor," she said finally. "Ms. Patterson is nice. I just got scared." "Okay," Richard agreed. "But will you tell me or her next time you feel upset, instead of running away?" "We can't help if we don't know what's wrong." Lily nodded slowly. "I'll try." Then, with the rapid subject changes typical of children, she asked, "Did you win against the Sharks today?" Richard laughed, relieved by her resilience. "Yes, I did. But I missed an important meeting to come home." Guilt flashed across Lily's face. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Richard said honestly. "Some things are more important than meetings. Now I believe we have a spaghetti date tonight." As they prepared dinner together, Lily in charge of breaking the pasta and stirring the sauce, Richard's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from his assistant about the missed investor meeting. He ignored them all. The corporate world could wait. Right now his focus was on the small girl carefully counting spaghetti strands to make sure they each got an equal portion. That night, after Lily was asleep, Richard sat in his home office making calls to apologize to the investors and reschedule the meeting. His assistant, normally unflappable, couldn't hide her confusion. "Richard, you've never missed a meeting like this before. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Melissa," he assured her. "Better than fine, actually. I'm just adjusting my priorities." After hanging up, Richard found himself staring at a framed photograph on his desk, one of the few personal items in the otherwise utilitarian space. It showed a much younger Richard, standing beside his father outside the small electronics repair shop, where he'd grown up learning the business. His father, a skilled technician but a poor businessman, had worked 16-hour days to keep the shop afloat, often missing Richard's school events and baseball games. "The business comes first, son," his father would say. "Without it, we have nothing." Richard had internalized that lesson, building Harrington Innovations with single-minded determination. The company had always come first, before his marriage, before his own health, before any notion of personal fulfillment. Now, for the first time, something else, someone else was taking precedence. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. The next few days brought new challenges. Eleanor Ross returned for her weekly check-in, bringing news that Lily's case was progressing through the system. "The good news," she explained as they sat in Richard's office, Lily occupied with an art project in the living room, "is that her previous foster placement has been permanently closed. Too many violations. The bad news is that means the state is actively looking for a new placement for her." Richard's jaw tightened. "She stays with me." "It's not that simple, Mr. Harrington. Temporary emergency placements like this are just that, temporary. Unless you're looking to become a licensed foster parent or—" She hesitated. "Or what?" "Or pursue adoption," Eleanor finished. "But that's a lengthy process. With home studies, background checks, parenting classes. It takes months, sometimes years." Richard leaned forward. "Then we start, and now today, whatever it takes." Eleanor studied him carefully. "This isn't like acquiring a company, Mr. Harrington. You can't just decide you want a child and make it happen through willpower and resources." "I'm well aware of that," Richard replied, his voice steady. "This isn't about what I want. It's about what's best for Lily, and I believe that's stability, security, and someone who cares about her future. Someone like you, Eleanor asked not unkindly. Yes, Richard said simply, someone like me. That evening, after Eleanor had gone, Richard found Lily in the living room arranging colored pencils in a precise rainbow order. He sat beside her on the floor, picking up a blue pencil and examining it. Lily, can we talk about something important? She looked up, instantly alert. In Richard's experience, children from stable backgrounds approached important talks with curiosity or mild apprehension. Lily approached them as potential threats, her body tensing as if preparing to flee. You're not in trouble, he assured her quickly. I just want to talk about the future, about our arrangement here. Lily put down the pencil she was holding, her full attention on Richard. Do I have to leave? No, Richard said firmly. Not if I can help it. Actually, I wanted to ask how you would feel about staying here, permanently. Lily's expression revealed nothing, a practiced neutrality that broke Richard's heart. For how long? She asked cautiously. For as long as you want, Richard replied. Until you grow up and go to college or get a job or whatever you want to do. This would be your home, and I would be... He hesitated, uncertain how to frame the relationship. I would be your guardian, legally. Lily processed this, her brow furrowed in concentration. Like adoption. The directness of the question caught Richard off guard. Yes, he admitted, like adoption. But it's a big decision and you don't have to answer right away. Would I call you Dad? Lily asked, her voice neutral, giving nothing away. Richard felt a strange flutter in his chest. Only if you wanted to. You could call me Richard or Mr. Harrington or whatever feels right to you. Lily was quiet for a long moment, methodically arranging and rearranging her pencils. Finally, she looked up, her blue eyes meeting his with unexpected intensity. I need to think about it. Richard nodded, impressed by her maturity. Of course. Take all the time you need. As he stood to leave her to her art project, Lily spoke again. Richard, if I say yes, would I get to keep my last name? Parker. The question revealed layers of complexity Richard hadn't considered. Lily's connection to her past, to her mother, to her identity before their paths crossed. You could keep your name, he assured her, or you could have both. Lily Parker Harrington, or whatever you want. Lily nodded, returning to her pencils with the serious concentration only children can bring to such tasks. Richard watched her for a moment, marveling at the resilience of this small person who had endured so much, yet still approached life with such careful consideration. That night, as he checked on Lily before heading to bed himself, he found her asleep with a book open beside her and her stuffed dog Max tucked under her arm. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her face, peaceful in sleep in a way it rarely was while awake. Richard adjusted her blanket, careful not to wake her. As he turned to leave, he noticed something on her nightstand, a small framed photograph he'd never seen before. It showed a younger, healthier version of Lily, alongside a woman with the same blonde hair and bright smile. Her mother, he realized. Lily must have kept it hidden all this time, her most precious possession. The sight of it, this tangible connection to Lily's past, placed now in the open rather than hidden away, felt like a milestone. A sign that perhaps she was beginning to feel secure enough to merge her past with her present, to trust that her memories wouldn't be taken from her, just as she was starting to trust that her new home wouldn't vanish overnight. Richard left the room quietly, hope and uncertainty battling within him. The path forward was unclear, fraught with legal, emotional, and practical challenges, but for the first time in his adult life, he was willing to embrace that uncertainty, because some things, some people, were worth the risk. Chapter 6. Storms and Shelter. 2 months had passed since Lily first came to live with Richard, and autumn was painting Central Park in fiery hues of red and gold. Their weekend walks through the park had become a ritual, with Lily gradually growing more comfortable in the outdoor spaces that had once been her home. Today, they strolled along the leaf-covered paths, Lily occasionally darting ahead to collect particularly vibrant specimens. This one's for my science journal, she declared, carefully placing a perfect maple leaf between the pages of the notebook Dr. Chen had suggested she keep. The journal had become a repository for Lily's observations and questions about the world. Everything from why leaves change color, to how elevators work, to why some people have more money than others. Richard watched her with quiet amazement. In the weeks since he'd broached the subject of adoption, Lily had been slowly blooming. She still had nightmares, still hoarded food, still sometimes retreated into protective silence, but those episodes were becoming less frequent. Her sessions with Dr. Chen seemed to be helping, as did the stability of their daily routine and the gradual introduction of other trusted adults into her life. "Richard," Lily called, breaking into his thoughts. "Can we get hot chocolate? The man with the cart is over there." "Of course," he replied, following her to the vendor, who had come to recognize them as regular customers. As they sat on a bench sipping their drinks, Lily suddenly asked, "Are you still fighting with the sharks at work?" Richard smiled at her terminology. "Not as much. Things have settled down since we got the Palmer contract. And the lady who was married to you before, does she still want your money?" Richard nearly choked on his hot chocolate. Lily's directness could still catch him off guard. "Jessica and I are working it out," he said carefully. "Our lawyers are handling most of it." Lily nodded sagely. "Divorce is complicated. Tammy in my old class had parents who got divorced. She got 2 Christmases but had to move to a smaller house." "Well, you don't have to worry about any of that," Richard assured her. "Our home isn't going anywhere." Lily took a thoughtful sip of her chocolate. "I've been thinking about what you asked. About adoption." Richard felt his heart rate quicken but kept his expression neutral. I think," Lily said slowly, choosing her words with care, "that I would like to stay with you, permanently if you still want me to." Something expanded in Richard's chest, a feeling so intense it was almost painful. "I do," he said simply. "But," Lily continued, her eyes on her cup, "I want to keep my last name, to remember my mom." "Is that okay?" "Of course it is," Richard assured her. "We could make Parker your middle name if you wanted, or keep it as your last name. Whatever feels right to you." Lily considered this. "Lily Parker Harrington," she tested the name aloud. "That sounds okay." Richard resisted the urge to hug her, knowing that Lily still initiated physical contact on her own terms. Instead, he extended his hand formally. "Then we have a deal, Miss Parker?" Lily giggled, a sound still rare enough to delight Richard every time he heard it, and shook his hand with exaggerated seriousness. "Deal, Mr. Harrington." That evening, Richard called Eleanor to begin the formal adoption process. Her response was guardedly optimistic. "It's a good start that Lily is on board," she explained, "but you should prepare yourself for a challenging road ahead. Single men adopting girls, especially wealthy single men, face additional scrutiny." "I understand," Richard replied. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes." What he wasn't prepared for was the media attention. 3 days after filing the initial paperwork, a gossip blog ran a story titled "Tech Billionaire's Charity Case. Harrington Takes in Homeless Girl." The story was largely speculative, with few facts, but it sparked a firestorm of follow-up coverage. Richard's PR team wanted to issue a statement. His lawyers advised keeping silent. His board members called emergency meetings, concerned about the company's image. Through it all, Richard focused on protecting Lily from the sudden interest in their lives. "Why are there people with cameras outside?" Lily asked one morning, peering cautiously through the blinds of her bedroom window. Richard sighed, setting down the pancakes he'd been about to serve. "They're called paparazzi. They take pictures of people they think are interesting or famous." "Why do they think we're interesting?" Lily asked, her brow furrowed. "Because I have a lot of money, and because we're becoming a family in an unusual way," Richard explained, choosing his words carefully. "Some people think that's newsworthy." Lily considered this. "Will they go away?" "Eventually," Richard promised, though he wasn't entirely sure. "But for now, we might need to be extra careful when we go out. And maybe skip the park this weekend." Lily's face fell, but she nodded bravely. "That's okay. We can play board games instead." The media frenzy escalated when James Westfield, still smarting from his defeat in the boardroom, gave an anonymous interview questioning Richard's motives and stability. Sources close to Harrington suggest this adoption is nothing more than a publicity stunt, or worse, a breakdown following his divorce, the article claimed. The board is deeply concerned about his judgment. Richard was furious, but Eleanor counseled patience. "This kind of scrutiny is unfortunately common in high-profile adoption cases," she explained, during their weekly meeting. The best thing you can do is stay the course. Keep showing up for Lily. The process will work as it should. But the process was taking its toll. The home study evaluations, while expected, felt invasive. The parenting classes, while informative, added another demand to Richard's already stretched schedule. And the constant legal maneuvering, as both Jessica's divorce attorneys and James's corporate allies sought to use the adoption against him, was exhausting. Through it all, Richard maintained a calm facade for Lily's sake. But late at night, after she was asleep, doubts would creep in. Was he doing the right thing? Was he equipped to be what Lily needed? Or was he, as his critics suggested, simply trying to fill the void in his own life with a child who deserved better? These questions haunted him as he prepared for the most crucial interview yet, a formal evaluation by the state-appointed social worker who would make the final recommendation regarding Lily's placement. The day of the interview, Richard woke early, feeling as nervous as he had before his first major investor pitch years ago. He found Lily already awake, meticulously arranging her room, making her bed with hospital corners, aligning her books by height, positioning her stuffed animals in a perfect semicircle. "You don't have to do all that," Richard said gently. "Ms. Ramirez just wants to see our normal home life." Lily looked up, her face serious. "I want it to be perfect, so she knows I belong here." The simple statement hit Richard like a physical blow. Despite all their progress, Lily still believed she needed to earn her place to prove her worthiness of a home. "Lily," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed, "you already belong here. No matter what Ms. Ramirez says or doesn't say, this is your home." Lily didn't look convinced. "But what if she says no? What if they make me go back?" "I won't let that happen," Richard promised, hoping it wasn't a promise he'd be forced to break. "And even if there are delays or complications, we'll face them together. Okay?" Lily nodded, but the anxiety didn't leave her eyes. It remained there through breakfast, through the morning routine, and was still present when the intercom announced Ms. Ramirez's arrival. Carmen Ramirez was younger than Richard had expected, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that somehow managed to put both him and Lily at ease. She spent the first hour interviewing Richard privately in his office, asking detailed questions about his upbringing, his relationship history, his work schedule, and his support systems. "A child needs community, Mr. Harrington," she explained, "especially a child who has experienced the kinds of losses and disruptions Lily has. Who else is in her life besides you?" Richard described Dr. Chen, Ms. Patterson, Eleanor, and Marcus, the small circle of adults who had become Lily's support system. He mentioned the tentative playdates they'd arranged with the daughter of Richard's head of IT, the only employee he truly trusted with knowledge of his personal life. "And what about family?" Ms. Ramirez pressed. "Your parents? Siblings?" Richard hesitated. "My father passed away 10 years ago. My mother lives in Arizona, in an assisted living facility. Early onset Alzheimer's. She doesn't always remember who I am." Ms. Ramirez's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Any siblings?" "A sister in Seattle. We're not close. Different life choices." Ms. Ramirez made notes, then looked up with a direct gaze. "Mr. Harrington, why do you want to adopt Lily? And please don't give me the answer you think I want to hear. Give me the truth." Richard considered the question carefully. "The truth is, it started as gratitude. She saved my life, literally, and I wanted to help her in return. But it's become more than that." He paused, searching for words. "Lily makes me see the world differently. She makes me want to be better, a better person, a better man. And I think I help her too. We're healing each other in a way." Miss Ramirez studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'd like to speak with Lily now. Alone, if that's all right." Richard agreed, though it took all his self-control not to eavesdrop as Ms. Ramirez spent the next hour with Lily in her bedroom. When they emerged, Lily looked surprisingly calm, even smiling as Ms. Ramirez complimented her science journal. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Harrington," Ms. Ramirez said as she prepared to leave. "I still need to review some documents and speak with Dr. Chen, but I should have my recommendation ready within 2 weeks." After she left, Richard turned to Lily. "How did it go?" Lily shrugged, suddenly interested in her shoes. "Okay, I think. She asked a lot of questions about before, when I was on the streets. And about my mom? That must have been hard, Richard said gently. Lily nodded. She asked if I was happy here, and if I felt safe. What did you tell her? Richard asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the anxiety tightening his chest. Lily looked up, her blue eyes suddenly fierce. I told her I belong here, with you. And if anyone tries to take me away, I'll just run away and come back here anyway. Richard felt a complicated mix of emotions, touched by her determination to stay, worried about her threat to run, concerned about how Ms. Ramirez might have interpreted such a declaration. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, he said, attempting a light tone. How about we make those cookies you've been wanting to try, the ones with the peanut butter and chocolate chips? Baking proved to be the distraction they both needed. By the time the cookies were cooling on racks, the tension from the interview had dissipated, replaced by the simple pleasure of creating something together. As Lily carefully transferred cookies to a plate, her tongue poking out in concentration, Richard was struck again by how naturally she had fit into his life, and he into hers. The following days fell back into their established routine. Though the waiting hung over them like a storm cloud on the horizon, Richard threw himself into work, finalizing the Palmer contract implementation and beginning discussions for a new product line. Lily focused on her lessons with Miss Patterson, showing particular progress in reading, though math remained a challenge. Then, exactly 13 days after Ms. Ramirez's visit, disaster struck from an unexpected quarter. Richard was in a meeting when his assistant interrupted, her face pale. "Richard, I'm so sorry, but there's an emergency. It's about Lily." His heart dropped. "What happened? Is she hurt?" "No, she's physically fine, but—" Melissa hesitated. "Her biological father has come forward. He's filing for custody." Richard felt the room tilt slightly. "That's impossible. Her birth certificate doesn't list a father." Helena checked all the records. Apparently, he wasn't in the picture when Lily was born, but he's claiming paternity now. He's given DNA samples and is demanding testing. His lawyer contacted Eleanor this morning. Richard left the meeting without explanation, calling Eleanor as soon as he reached his office. She confirmed the news, her voice grave. "His name is Daniel Carter. He claims he didn't know Andrea Parker had his child until recently. When he saw the news coverage about you and Lily, he has preliminary documentation that suggests he and Andrea were in a relationship around the time Lily was conceived." "Can he do this?" Richard demanded. "Show up after 7 years and claim a child he's never even met? Or legally?" "Yes, he can petition for rights," Eleanor said carefully. "Whether those rights will be granted depends on many factors. His fitness as a parent, his reasons for being absent, and most importantly, what's in Lily's best interest." "This isn't about Lily's best interest," Richard said bitterly. "This is about money. He saw a homeless kid suddenly connected to a billionaire and decided to cash in." "That's certainly possible," Eleanor agreed. "But the courts will investigate his motives. In the meantime, we need to prepare Lily. She should hear about this from you, not from lawyers or social workers." Richard felt sick at the thought. How could he tell Lily, who had just begun to feel secure that her world might be upended again, that a stranger claiming to be her father wanted to take her away, that all their plans, their carefully built trust, might be for nothing? When he returned home that evening, Lily was waiting with her usual question. How were the Sharks today? It had become their private joke, her way of asking about his workday. "The Sharks were troublesome," Richard replied, his voice strained despite his efforts to sound normal. "Lily, we need to talk about something important." Instantly, her demeanor changed. The relaxed posture vanished, replaced by the vigilant wariness he hadn't seen in weeks. "Am I in trouble?" "No, absolutely not," Richard assured her, leading her to the couch. "But there's been a development in our adoption process, a complication." Lily listened silently as Richard explained as gently as possible about Daniel Carter's sudden appearance and claims. Her face remained unnervingly blank throughout, giving no hint of her thoughts or feelings. "So, he says he's my real dad?" she finally asked when Richard finished. "He says he's your biological father," Richard corrected carefully, "but he's never been part of your life until now." "Why does he want me?" Lily asked, the question piercing in its directness. Richard struggled with how to answer. The cynical part of him wanted to say, "Because of my money," but he knew that would be unfair. Despite his suspicions, he couldn't know Carter's true motivations. "I don't know," he admitted. "He says it's because he just found out about you and wants to be part of your life. The courts will try to figure out if that's really true. Do I have to meet him? Eventually, probably yes, but not right away, and not alone. I'll be with you or Eleanor or Dr. Chen." Lily was quiet for a long time, processing. Finally, she looked up, her eyes filled with a determination that seemed too old for her young face. "I don't want to go with him. I want to stay with you." "And I want you to stay with me," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to fight for that. Lily, I promise." That night, after Lily was asleep, Richard sat in his office making calls to his lawyers, to Eleanor, to influential contacts who might help navigate the complicated legal waters ahead. By midnight, he had assembled a formidable team and developed a preliminary strategy. But as he finally prepared for bed, exhausted and worried, he heard a soft sound from Lily's room. Opening her door gently, he found her sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. "Lily?" he whispered, entering cautiously. "What's wrong?" "I had a bad dream," she admitted, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "About him. The man who says he's my dad." Richard sat on the edge of her bed. "Do you want to talk about it?" Lily shook her head, then changed her mind. "In my dream, he looked like one of the men from the shelter. The ones who were mean to my mom." She pulled Max, the stuffed dog, closer to her chest. "Richard, what if he's a bad person?" The question broke Richard's heart. "If he's a bad person, he won't get custody of you. The courts will see that. But what if they don't?" Lily pressed, her voice small. "What if they make me go with him and he's bad, and I never see you again?" Richard couldn't lie to her. He knew the system was imperfect, that mistakes were made, that children sometimes suffered because of legal technicalities and overburdened courts. "Listen to me," he said, taking her small hand in his. "No matter what happens, I will always be here for you. Always. If you need me for anything at any time, you call me and I will come. No matter where you are or where I am. That's a promise." Lily studied his face as if checking for signs of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Can you stay? Just until I fall asleep again." Richard settled into the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand. "As long as you need." As Lily drifted back to sleep, Richard watched the rise and fall of her chest, the occasional flutter of her eyelids as dreams, hopefully gentler ones, took hold. In that quiet moment, he made a silent vow. He would not let this child be hurt again. Not by Daniel Carter, not by the system, not by anyone. Whatever it took, whatever resources he had to deploy, whatever battles he had to fight, Lily would have the home, the security, and the love she deserved. She had saved him once on those train tracks. Now it was his turn to save her. Chapter 7. Full Circle. 6 years later. The spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Richard's Tribeca penthouse, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. The space had transformed over the years. Once a showplace of minimalist design and bachelor aesthetics, it was now undeniably a home. Colorful artwork adorned walls that had once been starkly bare. Family photos lined shelves that had previously displayed abstract sculptures. And instead of the pristine silence that had once filled the rooms, there was music, specifically the sound of Lily practicing her violin. At 13, Lily Parker Harrington had grown into a thoughtful, resilient young woman. The trauma of her early years hadn't disappeared, but with therapy, stability, and love, she had developed coping mechanisms that served her well. Her blonde hair, once tangled and dull, now hung in a neat bob that framed a face beginning to lose its childish roundness. She was still small for her age. The doctors attributed this to her early malnutrition, but what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination. Richard leaned against the doorframe of her practice room, listening as she worked through a difficult passage in the Bach Partita. She was preparing for her spring recital. Her brow furrowed in concentration. She repeated the phrase until her fingers found their way through the notes. Only when she lowered her bow did Richard make his presence known. "That sounded great," he said, entering the room. "Much better than last week." Lily smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. "Thanks, Dad. I finally figured out the fingering Ms. Abramson was talking about." The word Dad still gave Richard a small thrill, even after all these years. Lily had started using it about 3 years ago, cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence as she saw how naturally it fit into their relationship. "Are you ready for dinner?" Richard asked. "Marcus and Elena are bringing Sophie at 6, remember?" Lily carefully placed her violin in its case. "I remember. I promised to show Sophie my science fair project." As Lily headed to her room to change, Richard reflected on the long journey that had brought them here. The battle with Daniel Carter had been every bit as difficult as he'd feared, a grueling 18-month legal process that had tested their newly formed family bond to its limits. Carter had initially seemed formidable, presenting himself as a reformed ex-boyfriend who had only recently discovered his daughter's existence. But as Richard's legal team dug deeper, cracks appeared in his story. Evidence emerged that Carter had known about Lily since before Andrea Parker's death, but had made no effort to contact her. His financial records showed a pattern of failed businesses and mounting debts, and, most damning, interviews with Andrea's former colleagues revealed that she had deliberately kept Carter away from Lily, fearing his volatile temper and substance abuse issues. The turning point came during a supervised visit between Lily and Carter. Dr. Chen, present as Lily's advocate, observed Carter's behavior with professional concern. He alternated between disinterested and overly familiar, clearly had not prepared for the visit, and seemed more focused on impressing the social workers than connecting with the child he claimed to want in his life. But it was Lily herself who ultimately settled the matter. In a private meeting with the judge, a compassionate woman who had taken a special interest in the case, Lily spoke with a clarity that belied her 8 years. "I know what it's like to not have a home," she had said, her voice small but steady. "And I know what it's like to find one. Mr. Carter might be my biological father, but Richard is my dad. He's the one who taught me how to read chapter books and makes sure I take my vitamins and sits with me when I have nightmares. He's the one who loves me." The judge's recommendation had been unequivocal. Lily would remain with Richard, with Carter granted limited supervised visitation rights. Carter, facing mounting legal bills and waning public sympathy, eventually agreed to relinquish his parental rights in exchange for a modest settlement, enough to clear his debts, but not the windfall he had clearly hoped for. The final adoption had been formalized on a crisp October day, nearly 2 years after Lily had first pulled Richard from those train tracks. The photograph from that day, Lily in a blue dress, Richard in a suit, both beaming at the camera, now held pride of place on the living room wall. Life since then had settled into a rhythm neither of them could have imagined during those early uncertain days. Richard had restructured Harrington Innovations, delegating day-to-day operations to a trusted executive team so he could be home by 5:30 most evenings. The company had thrived under the new arrangement, expanding into educational technology, a direction inspired by watching Lily's learning journey. Lily had blossomed academically once her gaps in education were addressed. Math remained challenging, but with consistent tutoring and Richard's unwavering support, she had developed solid skills. Her true passion, however, lay in science and music, seemingly disparate interests that she pursued with equal enthusiasm. "Dad?" Lily called from her room. "Have you seen my blue sweater? The one Grandma sent for my birthday?" "Laundry room, second shelf," Richard replied, smiling at the domesticity of the exchange. Richard's mother, though still affected by Alzheimer's, had recognized Lily as her granddaughter from their first meeting. On her good days, she knitted colorful sweaters and scarves that Lily treasured, even as Arizona's warmth made them impractical. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of their dinner guests. Marcus Williams, still Richard's head of security and closest friend, entered with his wife Elena and their 9-year-old daughter Sophie. The two families had grown close over the years, with Lily finding in Sophie a friend who didn't ask uncomfortable questions about her unusual path to the Harrington family. As the adults prepared dinner, the girls disappeared into Lily's room, giggling over secrets only they understood. Richard watched them go, a familiar sense of gratitude washing over him. 6 years ago, his life had been defined by financial success and emotional emptiness. Now it was messy, complicated, occasionally overwhelming and infinitely richer. "You're getting that look again," Marcus observed, handing Richard a glass of wine. "The one where you can't believe this is your life." Richard smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knew you before," Marcus replied. "You were a good man then too, Rich, just a lost one." After dinner, while Elena helped the girls set up a board game, Marcus drew Richard onto the terrace overlooking the city lights. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said, his expression unusually serious. "James Westfield approached me yesterday." Richard frowned. James had left Harrington Innovations 4 years ago, after his final attempt to wrest control had failed spectacularly. "What did he want?" "Information about Lily," Marcus replied, "specifically about her mother." Richard's posture stiffened. "Why?" He wouldn't say directly, just that there were inconsistencies in the narrative about how you and Lily met. Marcus leaned against the railing. "I think he's fishing for something to use against you in his new venture. You know his startup is competing directly with our educational platform now." "Let him fish," Richard said after a moment. "There's nothing to find. Lily saved my life. End of story." But later that night, after their guests had departed and Lily was asleep, Richard found himself unable to rest. James's inquiry had unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Not because there was anything to hide, but because it highlighted how fragile their happiness sometimes felt, how the world was always ready to question, to doubt, to look for ulterior motives. Richard wandered into his home office, opening the safe hidden behind a family portrait. Inside was a file he hadn't looked at in years, the complete background investigation his team had conducted on Andrea Parker during the custody battle with Carter. He had commissioned it to find evidence against Carter, not because he doubted anything about Lily or her mother. Still, the information it contained had always felt complicated. The most troubling detail was one he had never shared with anyone, not even Marcus. 3 weeks before her fatal apartment fire, Andrea Parker had applied for a job at Harrington Innovations. She had been rejected at the initial screening stage. Her qualifications weren't quite what the HR department was looking for. But the timing had always haunted Richard. Had she known who he was that day at Grand Central? Had Lily's rescue been somehow orchestrated? Richard closed the file without reading further. It didn't matter. Whatever circumstances had brought Lily into his life, the bond they had formed was real. The love between them was real. And he would not allow James Westfield or anyone else to taint that with suspicion. As he returned the file to the safe, he heard a soft knock at the office door. Lily stood there in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Dad? Are you okay? I saw your light on." Richard smiled, closing the safe and locking it. "I'm fine, just catching up on some work. Why are you up? Bad dream?" Lily shook her head. "No, just thirsty. I was getting water and saw your light." She entered the office, perching on the edge of his desk. "You look worried." At 13, Lily was becoming eerily perceptive, often catching emotional undercurrents that Richard thought he had successfully hidden. "Just work stress," he assured her. "Nothing important." Lily studied his face, clearly not convinced. "Is it about my recital next week? Because if you can't make it because of your Boston trip, I understand. Really?" No, Richard said quickly. "I've already rescheduled Boston. I wouldn't miss your recital for anything." Lily smiled, relief evident in her expression. "Good, because I'm playing the piece for you. The Buck. Miss Abramson says it's too advanced, but I wanted to try it because you said it was your mother's favorite." The simple statement hit Richard with unexpected force. All these years, and Lily still found ways to surprise him with her thoughtfulness. It was her favorite, he confirmed. "She used to play recordings of it when I was small, about Sophie's age." Lily yawned, sliding off the desk. "I should go back to bed. Miss Patterson is giving me that math test tomorrow, and I need to be sharp." Richard stood, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You'll do fine. You've been working hard." Lily made a face. "Math is still the worst. I don't know why my brain doesn't like numbers." "Everyone has their strengths," Richard reminded her. "And you're getting better every year." As they walked back toward their respective bedrooms, Lily suddenly stopped. "Dad? Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that day? At the train station?" The question echoed Richard's earlier thoughts so precisely that he wondered again at her intuition. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Why?" Lily shrugged. "I was thinking about it today during history. Ms. Patterson was talking about how small events can change everything, like that butterfly effect thing. And I realized that if I had gone to a different part of the station that day, or if you had taken a different train, or if I had been scared to help you, everything would be different now. Richard considered this. That's true. But I prefer to think that somehow we were meant to find each other, that even if it hadn't happened that day in that way, our paths would have crossed eventually. Lily smiled, the expression transforming her face in the dim hallway light. I like that idea better too. After Lily had returned to her room, Richard stood for a moment in the hallway, reflecting on their conversation. The butterfly effect. Such a simple concept, yet so profound. A small girl makes a brave choice, and two lives are forever altered. Whatever James Westfield was fishing for, whatever doubts or suspicions he hoped to cast, he could never understand the truth of what had happened that day at Grand Central. It wasn't about calculation or coincidence. It was about two broken people finding each other at exactly the right moment and choosing day after day, year after year, to heal together. The next morning brought an unexpected invitation. Eleanor Ross, who had remained a friend and occasional advisor through the years, called to ask if Richard and Lily would speak at a fundraising gala for the Children's Rights Foundation. We're highlighting success stories in the foster and adoption system, she explained. Yours is particularly powerful. Richard hesitated. I'd need to check with Lily. She's been private about her early years, especially at school. Of course, Eleanor agreed. But Richard, consider this. Your story could inspire other potential adoptive parents, and it might help Lily see that her past, difficult as it was, has value. That it's nothing to be ashamed of. After discussing it with Lily, who surprised him by agreeing almost immediately, Richard accepted the invitation. The gala was scheduled for the following month at a luxury hotel overlooking Central Park. The preparation process proved unexpectedly therapeutic for both of them. Working with a speech coach recommended by Eleanor, they crafted their remarks carefully, Richard focusing on how Lily had changed his perspective on success and purpose, Lily addressing how stability and support had allowed her to overcome early trauma. On the night of the gala, Richard found himself unusually nervous. Public speaking had never bothered him. He'd addressed shareholders, industry conferences, and media scrums without a second thought. But tonight felt different, more vulnerable. Lily, resplendent in a deep blue dress that matched her eyes, seemed to sense his anxiety. As they waited backstage for their introduction, she squeezed his hand. It's okay, Dad, we've got this. When they took the stage together, the spotlight momentarily blinding, Richard felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. Looking out at the audience, wealthy donors, social workers, politicians, families like and unlike his own, he began their carefully prepared remarks. 6 years ago, I was a different man, he started, his voice steady despite his nerves. Successful by conventional measures, but empty in all the ways that truly matter. I had built a company, but not a life. I had accumulated wealth, but not purpose. He described that fateful day at Grand Central, the dizziness, the fall, the moment of terror as the train approached. And then, he continued, from nowhere a miracle. A 7-year-old girl, homeless and hungry, did what no one else would do. She risked everything to save a stranger. As Richard spoke, he was acutely aware of Lily beside him, her posture straight, her expression composed despite the difficult memories his words must be evoking. What Lily gave me that day wasn't just a second chance at life, he said, approaching the conclusion of his portion. She gave me a second chance at humanity, at connection, at love. People often tell me how lucky Lily is to have found me. The truth is exactly the opposite. I am the fortunate one. Every single day. Richard stepped back and Lily moved forward to the microphone. Despite months of preparation, Richard held his breath. Lily had never spoken publicly about her experiences before. My story starts before I met my dad, she began, her voice clear despite a slight tremor. It starts with my first mom, Andrea, who loved me very much but couldn't overcome the challenges life threw at her. It continues through foster homes, where I was safe but never really seen. And it includes months on the streets of New York, where I learned to be invisible because invisibility meant survival. Lily paused, taking a steadying breath. The day I pulled Richard, my dad, from those train tracks, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just saw someone who needed help. And for once I could be the helper instead of the one needing help. I didn't know he was rich or important. I just knew he was human, and so was I. As Lily continued, describing their early days together, the gradual building of trust, the fears and triumphs of forming a family, Richard felt tears threatening. He blinked them back, not wanting to distract from Lily's moment. "People sometimes ask if I miss my old life," Lily said, nearing her conclusion. "That's a complicated question. I miss my first mom every day. I treasure the few memories I have of her. But do I miss being hungry, scared, alone? Of course not." She turned slightly, making brief eye contact with Richard before addressing the audience again. "What I've learned is that family isn't about blood or background. It's about who stands beside you when things are hard. Who believes in you when you've stopped believing in yourself? Who sees you, really sees you, when the rest of the world has trained itself to look away?" Lily gestured toward Richard. "My dad saw me when I was invisible, and in saving him, I saved myself too. That's what family means to me." The applause was immediate and overwhelming. As Richard rejoined Lily at the center of the stage, he couldn't resist pulling her into a quick hug, public displays of affection still being something they were both working on. To his surprise, she hugged him back tightly, whispering, "We did it, Dad." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and networking. Several potential donors approached Richard privately, offering substantial contributions to Eleanor's foundation. A few families considering adoption sought out Lily, asking sensitive questions that she answered with remarkable poise. As they finally prepared to leave, Eleanor found them by the coat check. "You two were extraordinary," she said, embracing first Lily, then Richard. "The most powerful speakers of the night." "It was all Lily," Richard insisted. "I've never been prouder." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "You've come a long way from that guarded man who called me in a panic about a homeless girl he'd found. Both of you have." On the car ride home, Lily was uncharacteristically quiet, staring out at the city lights. Richard, sensing she needed space to process the emotional evening, didn't press for conversation. But as they approached their building, she finally spoke. "Dad? Remember when I asked if you ever wondered what would have happened if we hadn't met that day?" "I do," Richard replied. "I've been thinking about it more," Lily continued, her gaze still on the city beyond the window. "And I realized something. It wasn't just luck or fate or whatever. It was a choice. I chose to help you. You chose to find me. We both chose to trust each other even when it was scary." She turned to face him. "We keep choosing each other every day. That's what makes us family." As they rode the elevator up to their penthouse, Richard reflected on Lily's words. She was right, of course. Every relationship worth having involved daily choices, constant recommitment. What made their story remarkable wasn't the dramatic beginning, but the quiet, consistent love that had followed. Later that night, unable to sleep, Richard found himself drawn to the terrace. The city stretched before him, a tapestry of lights and shadows, lives intersecting in ways both seen and unseen. Somewhere in that vastness, a small girl had once wandered alone, invisible to all but the most careful observers. Now that same girl slept safely in a room filled with books, music, and the accumulated treasures of a childhood reclaimed. Richard thought about the butterfly effect Lily had mentioned. One small action rippling outward, changing everything in its path. A child reaches out to save a stranger. A man opens his heart to an unexpected connection. And together, they create something new from the broken pieces of their